Welcome to episode 67 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to South African explorer extraordinaire, Riaan Manser. Good afternoon, Riaan. How are you doing today, mate?
Good, Adam. Very nice. Thank you. Thanks for your
Good.
patience in getting to chat to me.
Oh, no problem. It's great to chat to you finally. The man with many stories, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
And we'll get into those stories, but tell us a bit about Riaan Manser pre-2003. Who was that? Growing up as a kid, was he a sportsman? Was he an explorer? Was he an adventurer?
Yeah, it's very relevant because I think people only know me. I mean, nobody in the world except probably just a handful knew about me before my journey. So it's fair enough. Man, I was always sporty as a kid. I mean, to anybody in my school and that knew me growing up, I was the guy that you threw a ball or any sporting equipment in my direction, I went for it. It really, that enthused me. I didn't have an easy childhood, so it was something I didn't battle when people gave me the opportunity. I didn't have this conundrum of should I or shouldn't I. I went for sports, and so I loved sports, especially the traditional rugby, cricket. Loved athletics, loved running, loved even doing things like squash. A little bit of a regret is not playing hockey. I felt that was for the soft guys. So I made a mistake over there because in regret, I would have loved to have played that tactical game and then dabbled a little bit in soccer just on a club level. Okay. And tell us, Riaan, did you excel at any of these sports, or were you like myself, who just loved doing everything, was good at everything, but never top of the tree? Listen, all of us think we excelled. We all have different images of us. Even though it was a pushover try, we still think it was a try from the halfway line. So listen, I think I was average. I think that some people would give me a bit more credit. I went to Natal School's trials as a kid, as a flanker. I still think I wasn't wearing the DHS socks. That's the reason I didn't make it. But hey, listen, bottom line is that it at that time it was relevant for me. It was like, why am I not able to excel in rugby, and why am I not? Because I'm from a little town on the Natal North Coast. That's probably why. And looking back, I just realized it's irrelevant, man. It's sport isn't everything. I wouldn't have done what I've done if I was trying to focus on being a professional sportsman. Cricket, I obviously played first team. I was captain of our swimming and athletics teams at school. So people might say I was okay. I think I was average. Oh, so I think you're being, slightly modest there. First team swimming, first team cricket. You need to be a pretty good sportsman to be that, especially in South Africa, because I do feel that our school sport is very strong. It's just, for me, It's the development after school where it gets lost to that professional level. But yeah, I think schools very much so, especially in rugby. Hey, if you think about that, and also in boxing. A friend of my best friend was an amateur boxer. He was SA champion middleweight division, and he turned pro so quickly, and went to try and go earn a living, whereas he should have stuck around and gone to the Olympics. And that was the problem. There was no funneling them in a little bit of a educated manner to say, listen, this is what you shouldn't be doing. It was rather, let's turn you professional, let's earn 20 grand a fight at that time, instead of sticking out and earning the $1 million. Yeah, which I think it is a big problem in South Africa in many sports. And I think maybe one we should actually try and focus on and try and fix, because you do look at the likes of Australia and stuff, and I do think their funneling systems are much better. After school? Yeah, so then I went, taking me back now. So then I played for Harlequins in Durban for a while, and I did all right there. Warren Brosnian, it was amazing, man. He was this flanker. I was playing center at the time, from this wannabe flanker back to center, because at that time centers were this good tacklers and win the ball type of guys, if you remember that time. And Warren Brosnian was at our club. Andre Jabeur made an appearance for us in one of the games.
Nice.
So that was pretty cool, my Harlequins times. And then I moved to Cape Town, where I played for Hamilton's, which was so cool because we had a turnaround season where the club was going through so much restructure, and it's the oldest club in South Africa. And still, when I think back to that, man, a privilege to play for them. You know, playing some of those derbies and the legend derbies. And there I played hooker. Can you believe it? You know, moving from the centre flank and then to hooker. That says something else, I think, about my activity. But I loved hooker. It was in the action. And then afterwards, playing for Helderberg was probably where I would have liked to have just ended my rugby career. It was a club it's a tough club. It's a club that doesn't take excuses, and it is a family. So you're in Helderberg, where I'm from, where I settled in Cape Town in Somerset West. Helderberg was there, and then other sports. Come on, man! When you've got work and one sport, you don't have time for anything else, and a girlfriend, you don't have time for anything else.
Well, if the girlfriend has anything to say, you don't have time for rugby or anything at all. Riaan, when you were growing up, so I mean, you're an explorer by profession, explorer probably by nature. It's probably built into you. When you were growing up as a kid, were you on your bike going all over the place looking for new things, or when did exploring become part of Riaan?
Yeah, I think it's in every South African's blood. You know, I stand in front of audiences so often, and I talk about my journeys. I share them, and I tell stories, and I see how it just kindles that fire in everybody else. If you're a sports person, you've got this desire to push yourself. It's innate in you. But in South African culture, it is also to explore, to go and see what is over the hill, what is next. And for me, when I started the bicycle trip, come on, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I wasn't saying I'm creating this career. I was saying my life isn't good enough chasing just money. I want to do something different. When I look back now at your question and you say, what was I like as a kid? Man, I was the kid that when kids said, let's follow the road, that's the Jeep track, that way we can cycle to school in relative safety. I said, but I wonder where that track goes. I wonder possibly that track also goes in the same direction. And the guys and it was sort of the friction that I had with a lot of, with my relationships, I think, at school, because kids always used to say, why does Riaan always want to go against the grain? I think if you want to be an explorer, you have to go where others aren't going.
Yeah. And I mean, when you were younger, did you look up to anybody in terms of explorers, or were you just, your heroes were sporting guys and that was it?
My heroes were definitely, if I had the chance to show you now, the little cutouts. I saw them the other day. We had moved our office, and one of my bags had this little collection of when I was like a 10-year-old of rugby cutouts. Rob Lowe scoring against the Pumas, and Ray Mort and Nas Botha. And I mean, just those are my heroes. If you told me that I wasn't excited when you told me stories about Livingstone and seeing the Victoria Falls for the first time, and discovering new places and sailing across oceans, that would be a lie, because I think my eyes just grew twice the size, and the excitement in me just doubled when I heard those stories. So I loved them, but like every other kid, I think in South Africa, our heroes were the rugby guys.
Yeah. And your first journey is quite different to the rest of them that followed. What made you want to get on a bicycle and circumnavigate the coast of Africa? I mean, that's quite a task to take on.
No, I was naive. Also, I don't think that I had any grand ideas, man. I love the idea, and it's probably one of the biggest teachings that I think I share with people when I talk to them. I like to amaze people and say, listen, this is what I did. I like to show people, look where I started, look where I finished. I was held by rebels. I was this, I was that. And I love to share that story. But then what the beauty about it all is, the crux of the whole story is that I didn't know what I was doing. All I was willing to do at the beginning and at the start of that whole journey was start. I was willing to get on the bicycle and go. I know that I wasn't one of those people that said, I want to do a grand adventure. I want to do something great. And the problem today with many, many aspiring adventurers, if you could call them that, and people that want to do what I do, is that they're waiting for the sponsors. They think the sponsor is the answer. They think that the magic wand is the person saying, here's your R1,000,000, here's your $1,000,000, go and do something magic. No, it started where I was leaving the waterfront with an overladen bicycle that I'd packed at 2:30 that morning for the first time ever. I had 5 people and a dog saying goodbye to me, waving me goodbye, and people think it was different. They think it was CNN and BBC and the cameras and everything else, and it wasn't. No, I didn't know what I was going to do on that bicycle trip, Adam. To answer you, I had no idea it was going to be such a grand, grand adventure.
I mean, we could probably talk for days about your adventures. 2 quick questions before we kind of move into the actual trip. What did you pack, and how much money did you take with you?
I always try to keep it simple when it comes to what my preparation was. At that time, I was very, very realistic. I said, listen, what do I need? I need a bicycle to travel. Good, tick that box. I need to sleep somewhere, so I'll grab a tent, maybe a sleeping bag, and maybe the odd rand year or two to buy a can of bully beef. And that's what I packed. So if you can imagine, that's what my bag was like. I wonder if I've got... No, sorry, my bicycle isn't here. I thought maybe the actual bicycle was here, but it's in storage. The bicycle looked very, very overloaded initially because I didn't know what to take with. But what I just explained to you now was what I eventually decided after about 2,000 kilometers what was necessary.
Cheapers. I mean, yeah, you must have obviously not worried about what you were going to be eating, because to eat bully beef for 2 years and 2 months, yeah, brave man. Riaan, a couple of stories that I've picked up on your trip. You were in jail in Equatorial Guinea. You were taken hostage in Liberia, and you ate monkey, rat, and bat. Tell us a bit about those. I mean, firstly, it must have been bloody nerve-wracking and worrying being taken hostage.
Adam, that's unfair of you. That's 3 big stories, man. You've got to choose which one, but I'll try and recap quickly. The Equatorial Guinea thing is that it's a militaristic state. We only heard about it on the news. We only hear about it in articles written in newspapers when we were growing up. And people would say, oh, I know what a militaristic state is about. You have no idea until you're there. I remember when I got through the border into Equatorial Guinea, I think I was in thick jungle, and I remember writing in my book that I knew things were different. I mean, it was literally a little bamboo boom gate that was allowing me into the country. It was different. I arrived in a town called Bata, and every single policeman that approached me was asking me for a passport and was harassing me. And in the beginning, I was comfortable. And eventually, one drunk guy that was sitting in a pub had shouted and shouted. And eventually, he got a child to call me from afar. I came closer, and then his guns were lying on the table. And then he said to me, "You bring your passport. You bring your gear." I did, and eventually, he had me just missing the ferry, missing the opportunity to be able to get to the main town, and passing the news forward that there was a mercenary in the country. And that's how I landed up in prison there. And that's the shortened version of that story. Liberia was
Did you crap yourself, sir? Sorry to interrupt. Did you crap yourself at this point? I mean, were you worried that you're going to get stuck in an equatorial jail and never be seen again?
Not at that time. That time I was still so bullish. I remember I was frustrated. It landed up me getting to a T-junction where I was leaving my bicycle on the side of the road with everything I owned. And this guy, from finding out that I was a South African, obviously a white South African was a problem in some areas, and Equatorial Guinea it was. And sure, man, I was in the police van and straight to the police cells, and my bicycle just lay there. I remember still in that ride on the way to the police station, thinking, bugger this, I'm going to show these guys. That was still okay. Liberia was definitely the turning point. That's where I really crapped myself. I mean, I'd been warned by the military in Ivory Coast that I shouldn't be going to a war zone that Liberia was. I passed through some villages where the kids were carrying guns. I felt threatened. I chatted to some guys. If you read my Africa around Africa on the Bicycle book, you'll see I met this group in a place called Toe Town where I realized these guys are baddies. I mean, these guys have done horrible things. And then the following morning, I was captured by these rebels in Liberia in the jungle. You can use Google Earth to go zone down into this little village. And when you see where it is, you get an idea of just how isolated I was. And that was the first time on that entire journey. It was probably about 8 months into my journey where I realized this is it. So it goes beyond just me peeing my pants and saying, hey, this is a shit situation. This was really where I thought 26th of February 2004 is the day that I die. I mean, I thought that. I saw my gravestone. I knew I was going to get stabbed to death.
I mean, and then you carry on. Lesser men would have given up the ghost there and then and tried to fly home or do something.
Yeah, I think, you know what, the beauty about that story is actually lands up being 1 kilometer later. The guys let me go after 8 hours, and it was a long 8 hours. I remember climbing onto my bicycle. I cycled it was a 100-meter hill, and I got to the top of this hill, and I remember looking back, and I don't know why I looked back, but I looked back at these guys, half of them coming out of this little room and were waving me goodbye. And I thought to myself, shucks, this is confusing me. 1 kilometer later, after that, I remember stopping and saying, what now? So you saying that's a measure, you know, of me maybe showing some determination. I agree with you now. In hindsight, I do look back. But I encourage people also who find themselves at that crossroad. You know, when something bad has happened, you're 1 kilometer down the road, you're trying to digest what has happened to you, and you've got the split in the path. And for me, I stopped, I thought about it for literally 20, 30 seconds, and I pulled up my map. Adam, I decided I was going to find a way to make up the 8 hours being captured by those rebels with the extra speed that I would do through the night. That was my choice. Can you believe that? And, you know, people say sometimes and flatter me by saying I've got great determination. I can only tell you by the actual experience of me actually doing it that I realized I did have determination. So I think there's a lot of people out there who have the same determination, but they need to go test themselves.
Yeah. And Riaan, I mean, everyone knows that Africa is a beautiful continent. I mean, we've got everything here. Was there one place that you saw or that you remember as being the most amazing place you've been to?
Yeah, I'll answer that for you in giving you 3 countries. So most people say to me, where was the most beautiful? Where was my favorite? I tell you definitely that Angola was the most beautiful for me, the way it made me feel. If you, I say it was like, Angola looked like when, in my image of when God created the planet, when he made it. The mornings, man, I used to stop on these bridges. It was still full thick mist where I couldn't see anything around me. The mist would rise, and then I would hear people in the distance washing clothes. And then slowly that mist would rise in like the space of 10 minutes, where you would see baobab forest, you would see the pine tree forest, you would see magic. And that was the most beautiful, probably the most interesting country that I would tell people to go spend their money in Africa would be Egypt. If you haven't been in front of the pyramids and touched them, you don't understand history. Forget about the Colosseum, forget about Europe, forget about the Scottish castles. You haven't seen it if you haven't seen the Egyptian pyramids. And then the most beautiful country people-wise, that was Algeria. I was captured twice by Al-Qaeda in that country, and still I come out of that place saying that the most beautiful people were in that country of Algeria.
Sure, that's a very interesting one. I've also traveled a fair bit in Africa, and I must say the Ghanaians to me have been my top choice so far.
Adam, you are being biased now because you knew you could speak English to them. I know that feeling also, but they are cool people. You know, the feeling I had was what you also had. I got through the border. I think, what is the border of Ghana? I think it's Benin, Togo, Ghana. Togo. So I came through Togo into Ghana. And man, I've been frustrated that people in Togo don't spend any energy for English. So I got through the border post and suddenly everything was English. And I loved the place again. Now, Ghanaians are amazing and also super educated, eh?
Yeah. And so safe. I just found it so incredibly safe.
Sure, very true.
You carried on. You finished your journey after 2 years and 2 months. Lots of 30,000 almost kilometers, 34 countries. Tell me that the week you got back, how did you feel? I mean, were you not a bit lost? Because for the last 2 years, every day you'd woken up and you'd got on your bike and you'd ridden. Now all of a sudden you got home and it was like, okay, now what must I do today?
The nail on the head, Adam. It was a surreal feeling. I think probably that last day when I was heading towards Cape Town, I'd slept in Caledon the night before, 150 k's away, and I was worried about what I was going to have to do the following morning. I was concerned. What do I do? Because every morning I'd wake up and I'd cycle at 100 and 150 kilometers, and here I was with nothing to do. I was a bit concerned, man. I had like 38 Rand in my bank account. Everybody thinks I had the promise of everything else. You know, I think the greatest understanding about my career is when people really know little details about little things, not just the grandness of saying, wow, look what he did. And they see people applauding and saying, what a hero, because it wasn't that. It was the real get up and go attitude that following morning with 38 Rand in my bank account, my friend Shane Smart lending me his bakkie so I could carry that car. I mean, take his car and carry my bicycle back home, sleep in my own home. The Table Bay offered me accommodation. Can you believe it? At the waterfront. I don't know if you know that hotel, but it's a pretty impressive place. And I denied the opportunity, which was nuts, man.
Yeah.
So, we listen. So your answer, just to answer you, I think the bottom line about getting back was it was a little bit of a hollow. I think I'd lived off nothing per day. And here I was confused back into a real world. If you really want to know the shock, probably the biggest shock of coming back from a journey was after Madagascar. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, we'll get onto that and you can tell us more. The reason I asked that question is I worked for FIFA during the World Cup here in South Africa. And our boss, who'd worked on many tournaments, pulled us into a room about a month before the tournament. And he said to us, guys, just enjoy every moment from here on till the end of the tournament, because post-tournament, you're going to go into such a depression, because for 4 years we'd been working towards a tournament, something that was going to happen. Then it happened, then it was over, and the next day it was like, okay, I no longer have a purpose. So I would kind of imagine that we relate to that.
Sure. Man, when you just mentioned now the privilege of us hosting that World Cup, I was in a town or a city called Rabat in Morocco when they announced South Africa as the winners. And I was sitting with a bunch of Moroccans, and you do know that we had them also step out of the race, you know. So these guys were gracious. So, the fact that you worked on that, I think that must have been a high. Were you at a lot of the games?
Yeah, I ran Soccer City for the tournament. So I was at every match at Soccer City. I was in the dressing room with the players. I mean, it was the most surreal, amazing experience. But at the end of it, it was like I'd been hit by a 10-ton truck. I just lost. Yeah, it was. Yeah, you can't really explain it. But
Adam, enough about what you're actually hitting over there. Sorry, man. The point that you hit on there also is that you find a lot of sportsmen. Imagine for them and the highs that they reach, and then for them it also comes crashing down. There's the next hero waiting, you know, around the corners, and we all go through that. It's amazing how we all go through that cycle.
Yeah. So then, from a bike to a kayak, what made you move, switch?
Yeah, I would have tried to paddle around. I love paddling in the sea a lot more than I do the cycling. So Africa was just too big to paddle around. I had just met Mr. Mandela Madiba had invited me to come meet with him. We chatted about many things. He spoke about the ambassador of his in Madagascar, Ambassador Monaisa. I'd met him also in Ghana. So there were a few connections. I obviously had watched also some of the documentaries on Madagascar, which I think you've also watched. They aren't documentaries. I always joke, they're cartoons. So people had fallen in love with Madagascar and just thought, shucks, what an interesting place. For me, I'd felt the same. I'd thought, you know, this used to be Gondwana land. This used to be the bigger part of Africa. And this mysterious place of Madagascar, why not go around there on a kayak? Adam, nobody had ever paddled around there. Eh? People had tried. Olympic paddlers, seasoned paddlers. People had tried to do it. If you and I talk now, it's a done thing because I did it. And we say, yeah, of course, it's an easy thing. But, man, it was a real exciting prospect for me.
And, I mean, on the journey, did you have any hair-raising moments, sharks, whales, whatever? I mean, you alone on a small kayak in the middle of the sea, yeah, cheapest. There's actually no chance I would do that. I can do some things, but I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, Adam, the actual challenge
alone for 11 months.
The wildlife. Yeah, no, it was a few days short of a year, eh? So it was nearly on the year anniversary that I finished that 5,500 kilometers. It wasn't the nature that was the challenge. It wasn't. I mean, I can tell you a few stories about sharks and whales breaching alongside me and many stories. But my record for being thrown in prison was, for one country, was Madagascar 5 times. 5 times I was thrown in a real deal prison. You know, not small little police cells being held by policemen in a waiting cell. I was in prison. And towards the end, I disliked the country. I sometimes say I hated the country, but you can imagine the fifth time I was in prison, I was down south in a place called Mbovum Bay. I'd landed on this rocky little beach and bumped into some of the Cray fishermen, and they couldn't speak a word of English, but they understood me to be a white bearded guy. On TV, the guy who had just overthrown the country was showing pictures of white bearded South Africans as mercenaries there to assassinate him. So imagine, these guys spot me. Man, a day later, I was in a police van, 2.5 hours driven to this place called Mbovum Bay to be in the Seabax prison that they've got there. And 4 days and 3 nights, man. Yeah, not easy.
And your kayak?
My kayak was left in the cell. I actually filmed. I've got footage of me holding the camera. So I hold the camera as like in the selfie mode, and I'm busy filming myself saying these guys are outside. They've just dropped. I've been playing soccer with the kids in the little town square, and the guys that accosted me told me, you've got a minute to get your stuff. And then I filmed myself just saying, listen, these guys are picking me up. And I grabbed one little bag, my kayak, everything. When I got back after the 4 days, stuff was stolen. But then I went to go see the mayor who had originally ratted me out. He helped me get my gear back, shoes and camera gear and stuff.
Jeepers. And I mean, did you ever go through like extreme loneliness? You watched that movie with Tom Hanks and he befriends volleyball. Were there ever moments like that for you where you were talking to, I don't know, something or someone that wasn't there?
It sounds like a loaded question because maybe you know about my story about Thomas. You know, Thomas was a Rapala. I wish I had him here now also. It's a normal plastic lure. If you know what a lure looks like, it's a little plastic fish with hooks on the front and on the back of the plastic lure. And the one that caught the most fish for me was a lure by the name of Thomas. Thomas was so brave. I mean, I'd throw him in the water and he'd go and fetch fish. Him and I used to chat so often about what fish we were going to catch, if we had caught enough fish, what fish we were targeting. So, yeah, I did, man. The story actually goes about Thomas, where he retired, was where Thomas had a big argument with me about having to go for another fish. I threw him into the water and he came out with a kingfish, and it was a 12-kilo kingfish. Fishermen always say their fish was that big when it was that big, but It was a 12-kilo kingfish. It was a big, big fish. And Thomas was hooked into the fish's mouth, but then decided with his activity and his energy to hook the other hook inside my finger. It was this finger that he hooked it into. And this 12-kilogram kingfish jumped off my lap 6 kilometers out to sea, was, man, just trying to dive as deep as it could, but wasn't breaking off this finger. And I still got little Thomas, but I don't talk to him that much anymore. But I was lonely, very, very much so. It was probably the saddest I've sometimes been when I realized that I hadn't spoken to a human being for like 10 days, not one word.
Yeah. And were you on land? You obviously weren't on land every night. So you must have been in the middle of the water at night times. You must have seen some amazing sunsets, but also crapped yourself.
Yeah. Listen, I think part of my job is crapping myself. I think I'm less dramatic about it now, so I don't get too excited when I'm really crapping myself. I think people are surprised when they say, gee, why were you so calm? And I actually wasn't. I was fretting inside. I had a few paddles at night. And landing that kayak at night is the scariest thing because you just can hear surf breaking. I don't have a GPS like you would have in South Africa telling you where the bays were and where the water channels were and deep. You could paddle easily in South Africa along the coastline. That is an easy thing to do. In Madagascar, there was nothing. It's fourth world. There's no lights on the beach. I was afraid, but listen, also when I think back now, seeing wildlife. I mean, you would sometimes, when there was phosphor in the water and whales come past, you see that ball of phosphor moving away from you, and you think you're in like a Star Wars movie or in something sci-fi scene. That privilege I would have never had in my life. Imagine, Adam, I would have never ever had the stories about wildlife and the dangers to tell if I didn't start those journeys.
Yeah, for sure. And then Riaan, you decided to go up north a bit. Jeepers, you couldn't have picked a colder place to go. And now you were going to do it with somebody. So that's a bit of a change. Firstly, you're going from sort of very warm weather to bloody freezing cold. And now you've got to put up with someone else's crap for 147 days. How did you decide to do it with Dan?
Yeah, Dan and I had a few social get-togethers. We had chatted often over a beer, and Dan's a super likable guy. Dan has got cerebral palsy, so I think what out of us as humans is that we do feel, and I hate the word pity, but you feel a responsibility to somebody that maybe hasn't had the physical opportunity. Dan comes from a super successful sporting family, and I really was bowled over by him and his enthusiasm. So if you ask me really what the idea was, it was that I wanted to give Dan the idea of what it took in my world. I mean, I had it wrong. I mean, let's face it. I threw Dan into a space and myself into a space that was going to be difficult. I mean, imagine me just paddling around Iceland in the worst winter in 63 years. Adam, it was going to be difficult. But man, we went and made history. The only people in a double kayak that have ever rowed around Iceland, 2 South Africans. I mean, that's pretty special.
The only people crazy enough to have done it.
Shame. I think Dan followed me. I think you have to give him some credit that he wasn't as crazy as me, but he was gutsy enough to see it through.
Yeah. And then, Riaan, was it beautiful, but a very different kind of beautiful, obviously, from what you'd been used to on the African side? Okay, let's try again. Sorry, we lost you there, Riaan. It must have been a very different beauty there up north. Obviously, you'd been used to Africa. You'd cycled around. Now you kayaked Madagascar. There's obviously not much to look at there, but quite stunning, I would imagine.
There's a lot to look at there. Adam, don't make a mistake about that. If you wanted a bucket list place, if you said to me there's one place you wanted to go before you do leave this world, Iceland is it. It has everything. It has, it's mesmerizing. The photographer that came with us, I said to him, stop telling me that you're working so hard. All you're doing is just putting your camera out of your tent sleeve, putting on an automatic and just going cluck, 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 cluck for like 5 shots around the outside. And he laughingly agreed with me. No, it is a stunning, incredible place. Dan and I think Dan must also, in his moments of contemplating what he achieved there, was that he saw what no other human being has seen from that perspective. Every single last centimeter of Iceland from the sea. And we saw cliffs that were 641 meters right above our kayak. So imagine out of the ocean, 641 meters just above us. That is mind-boggling. You don't even believe that story if I tell you it. Latrabiyarg was a place where Dan and I stopped our kayak, and it was a few days before his birthday, or just after. And I remember we stopped there and we said, we in our lifetimes will never have this opportunity. And Latrabiyarg, the cliffs, were only 450 meters right above us. So, no, that's one or two of the special places that we saw in Iceland. The newest piece of earth, the newest piece of land, Adam, that you can find on the planet is a place called Sirtse. Dan and I paddled just past that. So that's down south near a town called Vik. That's just south of Iceland. So, no, Iceland is phenomenal. It is breathtaking.
But very different, obviously, to what the African sort of elements.
For sure.
For sure. Then on to your next one. A little bit confused by this one. Not by going from Morocco to New York, but by deciding to go with your girlfriend. That is a very, very brave decision for a man to make, to be on a boat tester of note.
A relationship tester. You are absolutely right. I think the bottom line was that, again, being naive was the success of the story. Adam, a lot of people would say, no ways, I'm not going to paddle or row across anywhere with just my girlfriend, because we wouldn't have a relationship at the end. I think, no, it was tough. As a relationship story, I think that was the secret of us going to New York. I think the relationship had to probably go through that, I think, to grow and to become better. Do you know what a lot of people have interviewed us about in this lockdown time? CNN, ETV, BBC, the people have interviewed Fasti and I about our road to New York in 6 months in that tiny little boat to learn about relationships and lockdown. So it was a tough journey, but we survived.
And I mean, no disrespect, did she row just as much as you rowed? Did she pull her weight just as much as you did?
Without a doubt, no. Fasti, I think, exerted probably more effort. I think she, I tell you, one thing that I saw that Fasti became the strength of in that journey was probably the calmness of difficult situations. The ship nearly ran over us in Delaware Bay. So if you know, and I'm not going to look behind me again because I know the map is just somewhere in this office. Delaware Bay is the bay that leads up into Philadelphia. It's on the east coast of the United States. We were at night busy drifting over there with the tides in and out. And it was about 2:30 in the morning, and this ship called Krasnodar was heading for us. It just missed us by 20 meters. If you could imagine a 300-meter long oil tanker. After that, I was fuming inside this cabin, and I was shouting and saying, what am I going to do when I get hold of this guy? What can I do when I get hold of this captain? Fasti said to me, calm down. It is what it is. That would have never been in my vocabulary. Fasti was calm about even the most dangerous of situations.
So the two personalities actually mixed quite well during the trip.
They did, definitely. There is definitely something in the argument that adversity gives you strength.
Yeah. And tell us a bit about pulling into the bay at New York. I mean, New York's one of the most amazing cities in the world. I think it's probably in my top 3.
Sure.
I think it's beautiful. I mean, the coastline behind me that you can see now, it's absolutely stunning. Going up to that whole area, it just must have, Statue of Liberty, that must have been quite an emotional experience.
Yeah, you're right. When you talk like that, it brings back memories. I think for some of my friends that watch this that are in New York State and Jersey and Brooklyn, they'll love to hear you speaking like that, because the East River going up and the Hudson River are incredible, iconic views. For us to row there on a rowing boat, imagine, Adam, we are the only people in history that could say that myself and Fuss are the people that saw it from that vantage point. I mean, where do you get that? You only get it from making the choice to actually row there. So when you talk like that, it brings back memories. Though, if you do watch the documentary about our road to New York, you'll see that last morning rowing into the harbor entrance around Sandy Hook. Wow. I mean, Fuss and I nearly killed each other because of an argument, but probably the ship that just missed us probably would have killed us too. And then the rolling waves, man, 3 things that could have killed us easily on the last morning. But when we rode under, what is the bridge's name? The Verrazano Bridge, hey, that double link bridge. And when we rode through that, that's the only time that both of us felt that there's a chance that we could actually do this. We could get to New York City in a rowboat.
Gee, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Of those 4 experiences, is there one that stands out as your favorite?
Yeah, just not giving discount to the last journey that I did, which was last year. I rode across an ocean again with Fanafakile Lepaga, a South African from the Free State province. And I think every single journey was special in its own rights. I think the journey with me leaving on the bicycle trip, that Africa trip, was by far my favorite. So I'm not even going to try and bull dust you by telling you I love the other journeys more, but the Africa journey was definitely the biggest growing for me. But every single journey had special moments for me. With me doing something with Fusty and achieving that history with her was super special. But the story with Fanafakile, seeing another South African's perspective in tough times, was also very special, as like my other journeys were.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of clips from that, and yeah, there was certainly some hair-raising, shouting moments.
Shame, listen, I don't think I'm a quiet guy. I think I'm a good communicator. I think I always need people around me who can understand that communication. I think I don't waste time when it comes to shouting, listen, let's do this, let's do that. And when you've got somebody who's evenly yoked, as the saying goes, it becomes a lot easier. Fana was also a placid guy, so our combination of personalities probably made that a success as well.
Yeah. Riaan, what's next?
Yeah, I mean, the Odyssey was definitely something which I saw as the future for my career. I've got a little son now that is 2.5 years old, and my absolute life, man, I don't have anything else really that I focus on besides him, which is shocking. Hey, I mean, I should have a bigger vision. But the whole thing is that anything I want to do now is that I want to try and see how the hell do I take what I've done in 20 years? How do I take something that I can't just follow in somebody else's footsteps? There's nobody that I could say has done what I've done. Not a TV personality, somebody that's been in my space and done what I've done. What do I do? And it's difficult for me sometimes just to think of ideas, but I think I'm going to satisfy this need that everybody on the planet has for something challenging in their life. I'm going to start a little bit of sharing my stories, trying to do a little bit online. I'm not really always been the guy who's comfortable with that, but I'm going to do that a bit more. I'm going to run the Odyssey 2, which is in Antarctica. We had to cancel the plans for 2020 in Antarctica this year because of COVID. We will definitely do the Odyssey 2 in Antarctica next year, which is exactly like the Odyssey. We're going to put a global a call out to people to ask them, do they want to cycle to the South Pole? And I'm sure there's a lot of people that do, So that's going to be on the cards next. But if you really, really were just sitting with me over a good dinner and a glass of wine, and you're saying, what's next? I'm telling you now, like everybody that's gone through this lockdown, like everybody that's been forced to think things over, I'm going to do more of the things that I love and more of the things that really mean something to me. I'm not going to deal with this crap of the world that I have to do what others tell me is important. I'm going to do what Riaan Manser thinks is important.
I couldn't agree with you more, Riaan. Is it a dream, just in closing, is it a dream to do something with your son one day? Something like this?
Yeah, man. Now you're bringing a little bit of sissy in me, which says that I'm not going to let him be in danger. You know, I try and wrap the guy in a little bit of cotton wool, not too much, but for sure, imagine that. Imagine him one day becoming an older, wiser guy and talking about me and what he did with me. That would be a real legacy. You know, a lot of fathers watching this story or this chat between you and me probably will resonate, you know. They're all adventurous. All my mountain biking friends, all my guys that do exciting sports, all want to do it with their son. Good question, Adam. Definitely, I want to do it with my son. I want to let him have some memories of me.
I think, Riaan, to me, and sorry, we were supposed to close, but to me, one of the greatest gifts I can give my kids is a love for the African bush. I think one of the greatest loves you can give your son is a love for what you've done. I think, you know, respect and all those other qualities will come, but a love for something that's deeply ingrained in stuff like you, I think it's absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, Adam, you're right. You know, we only learn from other people's stories. We only learn when we see other people impart that knowledge. You look at Kingsley Holgate and his traveling prowess in the Land Rovers with his son. You know, now his son is doing that. You know, it's pretty cool. I mean, what are you going to leave your son? Just a house and brick and mortar, or a motorbike, or no? I'm going to leave my son memories. Very cool.
Yeah. Riaan, it has been unreal chatting to you. We could really listen to you all afternoon and evening. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been fantastic catching up, and maybe over a glass of wine or a beer when lockdown's over.
Would absolutely love that. Thanks for your time and putting this together, and I hope the guys who are watching this have loved it and just loved the stories.
Awesome. Thanks, Riaan. Catch us again tomorrow on Sport SA Daily Diary. We will be chatting to South African Paralympian Anroon Veyers.